Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Good Projects professional development session on the topic, What is Good Work? This workshop is the first in a series of professional development sessions that we are offering in order to provide educators with an in-depth understanding of the core concepts that the Good Project has used to develop materials like the lesson plans and activities on our website that many of you are using in your classrooms. So this is a great place to start in order to learn more about what we mean as a project when we talk about good work, what the framework is and research is that has informed that understanding, and also how you can use this concept in your own classroom with your students. So with that, we will dive into our topic today. Before we really look at what it means to do good work, we're going to think a little bit about what we mean on the project when we talk about work in general. So what is work? And at the Good Project, we believe that there are multiple ways that we all do work. Work can be represented through paid employment. So oftentimes when we hear the word work, we think about what we do for payment or as a job. That could be being a teacher, it could be being a waiter or waitress in a restaurant, it could be being a rocket scientist, really anything. But also, we on the Good Project don't have a restrictive view that work is only paid employment. So work could be the student work that you do as a student before you are entering the workforce. It can be the things that you do in order to ensure that you're doing your studies well. Work could also be volunteer work. So it could be things that you do in your spare time because you have a passion. It might also be for the same reason, hobbies. So perhaps you play a sport or do an artistic practice. That in a way could be your work. And there are things that we would also consider work that aren't represented on this slide. I'm sure you could think of many of those. For example, it might be work that you do as a parent to take care of your family. However, then we think about what does it mean to really be doing good work? And when you hear this term good work, you might have some common connotations. So you might think of maybe a job well done could be good work, a supportive compliment to someone else. Maybe good work is a term that you use when you want to show someone that you appreciate what they've done. It could be a standard. So maybe good work is meeting a particular grade or achieving a particular outcome that you were trying for or striving for. Or it could be a feeling that I know good work when I see it because of a feeling that I get. On the opposite side of that, you might also be able to recognize the absence of good work. So the lack of good work could be a lack of effort. It might involve poor outcomes. So feeling like you didn't achieve a certain target or not reaching a certain benchmark yourself or with others. The lack of good work could be represented by immoral actions. So maybe there was a particular ethical breach, or it could be a feeling of, I know it when I see it as well. Maybe you feel a particular sense when you know that good work hasn't been achieved. However, on the Good Project, we want to try to go beyond these maybe immediate connotations of good work or its absence. And really, the goal of our project is to look more slowly and intentionally at how we all know, understand, and accomplish good work in our daily lives. And some of the guiding principles of how we understand good work and how we want to be cultivating people to think about their good work is that we should be attentive to the qualities and behaviors that we want to cultivate in ourselves and in others. We want to also try to move beyond a particular benchmark like a grade and just think, okay, if I've ticked that box, I've achieved good work, and really be more attentive to the complexity of questions like, well, how is our work produced? What kind of personal effort or personal standards went into it? And really try to just be more complex rather than just achieving a particular goal or outcome and that being it. Good work is also regularly reflected upon. So something that we try to do on the Good Project is give people the opportunities, the prompts, and really try to build a habit to reflect upon their own personal understanding of good work for insight and for growth. And that ties into this next bullet point here as well about being guided by personal values and context. So one thing that the Good Project is really focused on is trying to help people understand through their own personal vision how they believe good work happens, aligned with their values and the context in which they live and operate. And then finally, specific but open to complexity and flexibility. So good work as a nurse might look different than it does for a journalist or someone who works at a restaurant or a teacher, for instance. Those are examples. Good work might look different in different workplaces, but it's also specific enough that we can say, okay, I understand when good work is happening. I know how to evaluate myself and my actions, and as well as the values, beliefs, and actions of others in order to be able to determine whether I feel that good work is really taking place here. So, with all that information about what the Good Project is seeking to do, trying to get us to look a little more deeply, intentionally, and slowly at what good work means, our project has done research into the nature of good work, and that has included with professionals and with students across time. We've been doing this work for a couple of decades, and through that research, we've developed materials to try to help people, as I said, explore their ideas of good work. That includes the lesson plans that many of you will be using in your classrooms. And really our goal is to help people develop more complete understandings of their work through the personal reflection that they'll be doing. And then hopefully from that, support and encourage people to actually do good in multiple ways now and in the future. So from the reflection that they've done, hopefully they will take actions in the real world as students and as workers to really be trying to enact good work based on their understandings. We're going to do an activity now that tries to get at your own understanding and your personal viewpoints about good work for you. So we're going to ask you to choose an artifact that represents good work to you. And I've provided some examples here. The artifact could be an example of student work from your class that you believe is good work. It might be a picture of a mentor or an influential figure who you believe is a good worker. It could be an object that you yourself have created that you think is an example of the good work you have done. Maybe it's a memento, something that might be personally meaningful to you. It could be an item that's within reach of you right now. If you feel like you want to pick something kind of off the cuff, something that you could relate to good work that you see around you. Or it could also be something else. Maybe it's not covered by one of these categories, but you can think of something else that represents good work to you that you want to be analyzing. So choose your item. And if you want, you can pause the video here in order to choose. Once you have your object, we're going to ask you just look closely and consider your artifact and ask yourself some of these questions. And you'll want to be jotting down some notes for yourself as you look at your artifact. So I'll read these questions aloud. These are by no means the only questions you could ask yourself, but they're meant to prompt your thinking. So ask yourself, what is your artifact? Just write down what it is. What made you choose it? How would you explain to someone else why this artifact represents good work if you had to explain it to a colleague or maybe someone who didn't even know you? Why does this recommend or represent good work to you? What specific qualities of good work are represented by your artifact? So if you had to name a few different characteristics that you think qualify as good work that this artifact is really embodying, try to write those down and put a name to those. And then how do the qualities of good work that you named maybe relate to your own work? Are there ways that you try to bring those characteristics that you've identified into your own work as an educator or as something else? So take about 10 minutes for yourself to sit with your artifact and just jot down some thoughts on a piece of scrap paper or on a digital sticky, something like that, just so you remember what you were thinking about as you sit with this object. And as a reminder, if you are doing this activity with your colleagues or with some others, you can use these questions to discuss together and each look at that object. So as you do this, you can feel free to pause the video here and then come back when you have completed the reflection. So now that you've thought about your own definition of good work through your object and your artifact that you were looking at, we're going to talk about our definition of good work on the project. So how does the good project think about, consider, evaluate what good work is? So again, we have researched on the good project both workers across professional areas. The initial research that led to this framework that we're going to be talking about was done with a variety of different workers that included teachers, K through 12 and higher education, doctors, lawyers. It included geneticists, theater professionals, scientists, journalists, and more. And we've also over the years done research with a lot of students, especially adolescents who are in high school, and particularly those who maybe were deeply involved in a particular field, like those I've mentioned, or students who are doing social impact work or who are motivated to be doing that kind of social impact work in the future. And what we discovered is that good work for a lot of professionals and for students, even today, satisfies these three dimensions, which are intertwined with one another. So our core framework of good work is that good work is excellent, ethical, and engaging. So it has these three elements: excellence, ethics, and engagement. How we think about or define those is that excellence is high quality work that meets a particular standard. Ethics is work that is attentive to social impacts. So the person who's doing ethical work might think about, how does my work affect not only me and those close to me, but also those who are further afield? And even how does my work impact the society that I'm a part of or the world? And then finally, on engagement, it would be work that results in a sense of purpose or meaning around the work that the worker is doing. And we've continued to investigate these themes, these three elements, or three E's as we call them. So each one starts with the letter E. And we've done research, follow-up research, to ask students today even, what do you think these three E's mean? So these word clouds were generated from fairly recent research with students, asking them how they would think about or define each one of these. So as you can see, for excellence, it's a lot about effort, doing work with efficiency. You can see that word quality there as well. That's really what we think about when we hear excellence. Ethics being about community, benefit for others, and then engagement around feeling meaning, proud. You can see the word feel there really big. So trying to find that maybe more emotional connection to the work that we do. And these are not the only ways to define these words. We'd like all of you to be thinking about how you would define and consider these words as well as you work with these ideas and you try to bring these ideas to your own classroom. But that's just to say there's flexibility around how these are implemented. So the three E's, as we've said through this research, they're widely applicable across environments. So excellence, ethics, and engagement don't just appear in one particular field or another. They really seem to appear across the working world and across environments. They are personally relevant and adaptable within reason, we say. So people can develop their own understandings of how excellence, ethics, and engagement might be displayed for them in a particular workplace or in a particular day. Still, though, we try to keep some standards. So even though we might not say, for example, there's a particular ethical framework that we are working with on the project to know or to tell people what is right and what is wrong, what we're trying to do is get people to be sensitive to ethics as a dimension. So developing their own ethical understanding and really considering when they encounter workplace decisions, what is the right thing to do here? What are my ethical principles? How am I going to pause, think, reflect, and also get others on board, potentially with how I think about ethics? And then evolving over time and may need to be revised and added to. So these three elements, excellence, ethics, and engagement, may not be the only aspects of good work as we continue to do research. So some elements that we've been considering adding to these in the future might be something like equity, and that being a particular element that we want to be attentive to in work. How does all of our work advance equity and equitable causes? Or for example, empathy, trying to get a more relational aspect rather than just thinking independently. So we would love to hear your thoughts about what you think might need to be added to in this framework. So I want you to look back at what you wrote about your artifact from the activity where you reflected, and you can think about these few questions here. So how did what you wrote about your artifact relate to these three dimensions that we just talked about: excellence, ethics, and engagement? How might your thoughts have perhaps been unrelated to these three dimensions? Were there ways that you maybe moved beyond them? Or were you perhaps thinking about something else when we asked you to consider what good work means to you? And then again, what would you add to these three dimensions? Is there something that you might feel is missing from this framework that is particularly important for you or in your context or organization or society? So you can pause the video here and either personally reflect about this or have a conversation if you are doing this with others. So as you think about ways to apply the 3 E's and maybe other thoughts that you had as a result of this exercise, we wanted to offer a few suggestions for how you might bring this framework to your classroom and to your students who you are working with. So first is the idea that you can talk about good work and its meaning with your students on a regular basis. So that could involve building time in your classroom to be discussing this framework or to regularly be thinking about what good work is with students. On the next level up here, we have the idea of building a consistent culture of good work in your classroom and into your routines. So that might involve doing something like a periodic good work period where you have a reflective discussion together about what good work looks like. It may involve doing things like hanging up posters in your room. It might involve routinely referring to particular values or aspects of the framework that you want to remind students of in your classroom, and really trying to make those a coherent feature of what students are experiencing as the culture of your classroom. And then additionally, another level up would be thinking about how to make good work a central focus at your school or across the institution. So at the Good Project, we believe that this framework and the idea of doing good work could be maximally effective if students are getting this message from multiple different vantage points and multiple different arenas based on where they are in the school. So if it's a standalone period, that can work well, but even better if students might be hearing messages about what it means to be excellent, ethical, and engaging from different teachers across departments, and for these to be perhaps even values that your school is trying to adopt. So that's something else to be considering. And it's not that you necessarily would have to even rewrite your mission statement or something like that in order for this to be a feature of your schooling model. We would just ask you to consider how might the idea of good work be feeding into or reinforcing values and commitments and programs that your school is already using and might have as a goal for your students. For example, how does the idea of what it means to be a good worker and do good work fit into who you want your students to be and what you are hoping for them from their educational experience? And I've left this question mark in the upper right because I'm sure you can think of many other things that you might want to be doing either at any of these levels or even beyond. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts about that as well. So this is another opportunity just to pause and reflect from what we've thought about today together, what you've considered. And it's a thinking routine that was developed by Project Zero. So it's just a simple sentence completion. I used to think, and now I think. So it's meant to try to get you to be thinking about how your thoughts might have been changing as a result of today's session. So sit for a moment and try to think about, what did I really learn? How did I used to think about this topic? And what do I think now that might be a little bit different? So again, you can pause the video here, think about this for a second and record your thoughts or talk about it if you are with others. And with that, thank you for joining our professional development session today. Thank you for sitting with us for a bit to think about what good work means, how you understand it, and how our framework intersects with that. We'd love to hear from you as you bring these ideas to all of your classrooms and develop your own expertise around these topics. Thank you.